Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
IVM Likes is an IVM production, and if you like our discussion about pop culture and movies, you should definitely check out our show Anything But Bollywood. Every week, Neha sits down to talk to some of India's best creators and filmmakers about art, cinema, their inspiration, and pretty much anything but Bollywood. So check it out, new episodes out every Monday.
Hello and welcome to another episode of IVM Likes. I'm Sharanya and today I'm in the studio with Navin and Josh.
Yay!
Very nice, guys. So today we're going to change it up a little bit, not a lot. So we're going to do a quick discussion on the representation of Bombay in pop culture, in books, in movies, and I don't know if there are any in TV shows, but maybe. And then at the end of the show, Amit is going to come do a little tribute section that he wants to do. So let's get started.
But aren't we doing like a monologue about Bombay and how brutal it is, but also how amazing it is?
But life-changing.
Yeah.
From the slums to the Antillas.
यहाँ की भागा दौड़ में लोग अपने आप को भूल जाते हैं, लेकिन रात को जब थक के घर आते तो उनको खुशी मिलती है क्योंकि वो. Have you seen those ads like all the time when people pimp Bombay so much?
This is the end of Wake Up Sid when Kokona writes that column.
Yeah. So it's.
मैं जब Bombay City आई थी मैं अकेली थी.
हाँ.
इस शहर ने मुझे कितना कुछ दिया है.
हाँ, इस शहर की बात ही कुछ और है. But that is true. I think having lived and born and brought up in Bombay, there's a certain charm to it which you can't ignore. There's a lot of heat, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of traffic and garbage and cows and noises and pollution. But beyond all of this, there's a city which has its own cultural integrities which stand out, and a lot of people have been able to capture it beautifully.
I agree.
We spoke about Ravan and Eddie, which Kiran Nagarkar wrote back in some of the episodes, and I think it's one of the most honest and brutal explanations because I grew up in a chawl when I was growing up in some part of Santa Cruz, and this is where he's based somewhere in like Dadar, and it's very similar to my growing up because we lived like one Catholic family, one Hindu family, and one Muslim family, and all three kids were friends.
Yeah.
That's how nice it was,
Yeah.
So I think that was the first step for me to looking into Bombay and literature, and then we all read Shantaram and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think when you find even like when pop culture does a little bit of thing that you connect with, it immediately feels so real because Arvind Adhika's second book, which was Last Man in the Tower, in that book there's a guy who's refusing to give up his building, right, for redevelopment. And he has a really specific routine, which includes catching the specific train from Santa Cruz to Dadar and changing. And the way it's written for like timings and having to make it, if I don't make that, then I can't get the next train because the next one is a lady special and then the one is a 9 dabba. And because I've travelled in trains my whole life, I was like, I totally understand this character literally because I understand planning your life around trains and timings and things like that. Where you're going to stand on the platform, it'll be a 12 dabba, then suddenly they'll announce it's a 9 dabba and you got to run. So I feel like that is great when pop culture gets specific about cities. Then you feel like I understand this really well.
Like even if you watch like the Lunchbox, the small scene where she goes and sits in the cooler cafe, and it's like a very, because any other movie would have like emptied the cafe and put them in the picture, but here they have the bustle, the waiter boys walking right in front of them and everything, and it's pretty good. I think it's the Irani cafes of Bombay is what for me like stands out a lot.
I think when you were saying that like Bombay has all of these things, I think the thing is that in this city everything is turned up full, everything, culturally, sound wise, traffic. I think there's nothing that like is average. Everything is at high level. There's no moderation. We are at full high for everything, and that is overwhelming. I understand that, and I know a lot of my friends who travel from abroad and come here are always like unnerved by the beggar girls knocking at your taxi door.
Yeah.
Like to me, I have completely zoned it out. I have ignored them completely, and it doesn't even affect me. But they're like, she's looking at me. How can we leave them? Can we not do something? I'm like, if you start here, you'll be doing it forever.
But then like that's the first level of seeing like how humane you are, and slowly you slip away from that. At a point when like there's some guys who come and clean your window, and they only make it dirty, but still like you just like stare right through them. And you're ready to drive also through them because you're like you can't.
I love when rains and floods happen and there are people helping out and giving biscuits and the newspaper say the humanity of Bombay. I'm like, every day we ignore people shitting on the street because we can.
And that itself is flooding up and coming to our level. So it's
I think, did you guys read a lot of, when Shantaram came out, it was like a big boom for Bombay-based stories, including like your Munna Bhai MBBS and all of those that are very Bombay Tapori culture.
Dhobi Ghats.
Yeah, did you guys watch that? Did you like that?
Dhobi Ghat.
I mean, all Bombay stuff. Like that.
I saw Dhobi Ghat
phase.
for sure, but Shantaram was a good book. No, it was a good plot, but the way
Yeah.
he wrote it was very romanticized, and how much of it was true is also. But you did get immersed in that whole world of like him living in the slums and doing all his mad stuff, and then the whole underground. And that's another thing that is like a theme in a lot of Bombay-based stuff is the mafia, or like how many portrayals of Dawood Ibrahim has been
Yeah.
in
So
Black
many.
Friday.
Black
Yeah.
Friday.
Dongri to Dubai.
Yeah.
Company.
Company.
There's some other one.
Satya.
Satya also, yeah.
All the shootouts at Vadala and Lokhandwala.
Lokhandwala, Kandivli or Andheri. He didn't specify that.
Yeah.
So do you guys ever go seeking stuff that are city based? Because sometimes I feel like if I wasn't in Bombay, I don't know if I would read these things because I don't know if I would have any connection or if I'd be able to imagine them correctly.
Yeah, so have you watched Life in a Metro? Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that movie which Saini Ahuja was still around.
Yeah.
And that movie was like making a big deal about how this is a Bombay-based story, but it became eventually about the people.
Love story.
City was a backdrop, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
given like when Irfan Khan ran into train to like with a horse and everything, that was like fun. But in that you wouldn't see on an ordinary day in Bombay. You know,
Correct.
that's not the deal. Like
Correct.
so in that movie, the city became a backdrop, and
Yeah.
these guys like they're walking in the Mumbai Devi temple, the steps and everything. It's like it's nice. It's
Yeah.
location based, but nothing happens.
Yeah, location based is different. Like a lot of Western TV shows always have this like New York is a character,
Yeah, yeah.
like Sex and the City. New York is another character
Yeah.
with girls. Brooklyn is a character. Bombay is a character for sure by itself, but I don't think we make that many movies or whatever that Bombay is a part of so like
It's more
internally.
it's I think it's like in Canada they have Vancouver, right? And so many landmarks are there in so many Hollywood films. But because you don't know Vancouver, you assume it's whatever city they're talking
Ah.
about.
It's probably Detroit or something.
But
Correct.
and it's like in here, it's like Johnny Gaddar, I think, is set in Bombay, but you don't really think of Bombay as a character in the
Correct.
film.
Correct.
But in Wanted, I had to bring it up. There, even though Bombay is not much of a like,
I will specify it's the Salman Khan one.
yeah, the
Salman
Salman
Khan
Khan
Wanted.
one.
Aisha Takya.
Yeah, not Angelina Jolie. But in that film, I felt like watching it. At least Bombay did feel like a big, it was identifiable in the film, as in the things they were doing, and I don't know, just it, the police or the kind of characters or what was going on. It just felt like it was Bombay based. But I didn't feel that about Johnny Gaddar because I guess the plot is different. Or,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sometimes it's important to name it like that, like Bombay Boys, Bombay Talkies, Bombay Velvet.
Yeah.
So you know exactly where they are. They're like, I get what the story is.
Bombay Velvet was all
Bombay Velvet was terrible, but Bombay Talkies was slightly interesting. In some of the stories were interesting.
Salam Bombay as well.
Yeah.
Salam Bombay is
but
a great
Bombay
film.
Talkies is the one with the 4 directors, right?
Yeah.
Salam Bombay, of course, is the what we
When-
call highlight of like
yeah.
Bombay
Yeah.
culture in general.
Yeah, the original Slumdog.
But
Yeah.
there's one movie that was really like ignored back when it came out. Ek 40 ki Last Local.
Correct, with Abhay Deol and
Yeah, so
Neha
it's like it captures the night time of what Bombay is like. So everybody like the bustle and everything in the daytime. At night, Bombay is equally eerie and like something happens in the shady lanes of Bombay. And it was
Oh my
shot in
God.
my hometown as well. Like,
really?
Yeah, so everybody like talking about how Bobby Deol was in my town, but it was Abhay Deol. So
I
it was,
can't
like-
believe you remind me of this movie, dude.
It had good songs as well.
Yeah.
क्या हुआ जो लारी छूटी जीवन की गाड़ी छूटी कब है तो मुझको ना जगा yeah, nice.
That was a good song. Dude.
Yeah. Also, oh, by the way, Taxi 911, which
The
was
one with Nana Patekar.
yeah, Nana and John Abraham, and that's the only movie I empathize with John Abraham's character because he goes to a lot. And again, good songs.
I loved, like, Nana Patekar lives in this house with his wife,
Yeah.
Sonali Kulkarni, and the house looks so realistic.
so small.
Bombay,
It's so real. Yeah. Again, call back.
I think I watched a video about the art direction on that. I think I have a vague memory of it, where they talk about, like, you know, above the what do you call it, the Godrej wala cupboard, there are all these bundles of cloth just tied up and kept,
Yeah,
like how
yeah.
you put in your like above things.
Suitcases and
exactly
stuff. Yeah,
like
exactly.
that.
Great movie.
Yeah, that had a good song too, the meter down song.
Oh yeah, that one.
किसी-
किसी का छुट्टा किसी की दौलत किसी का लव तो किसी की मोहब्बत यहाँ पे जिंदगी की हर खुशी रुपया है या डॉलर या पाउंड a meter down.
You know, for the last week, I've been listening to the Rangila soundtrack back to back because
Yeah.
apparently it released this week in 1995. And Amit Gurbaksani wrote a really great story about the music on Scroll. You should check it out. But they had a lot of this Bombay stuff where, you know, she dances on Juhu Beach just
Yeah.
practicing. I'm like, how?
She
When?
even goes to fantasy land. When was a thing.
Yeah, and he's selling tickets in black.
To,
You know, my parents tried to buy Rangila tickets in black.
Oh yeah, same.
So meta. I feel like I have a little bit of a defense when non-Indians make movies about Bombay,
Yeah.
or write about Bombay, including Shantaram, because it feels like an outsider perspective. Even a couple of years ago, when Catherine Boo wrote that Behind the Beautiful Forevers, which is Dharavi based, I was like, I don't know if I want to read this. It's not that I know this happens, but I think there's a little bit of a defense I have where I want to ignore this slum situation or their lives, and then when you are forced to read it from an outside perspective, you're like, I don't think she's right. And it's the same with Slumdog. Slumdog is literally just like, it's Bombay's magic,
Yeah.
which is also not great.
These kids are jumping in the nala, and then this one kid falls in shit, and like it's mostly so that is obviously a part of.
Correct.
Again, like if you go to the airport strip also, while the flight is taking off, you just see like a bunch of kids sitting on the barricade that is dividing the airport and the slums. Okay, they're sitting on a 12-foot high barricade and shitting on the airport side. Like look at the balls, like literally, but also figuratively. You know what I'm saying? So, so when Slumdog came about, a lot of people got defensive against because again it went to Oscars and everybody was watching it.
Yeah.
But
And then you have like foreign travel saying like, let's go to Bombay and look at this magic. Like, let's go to the Ganga and let's go to Dharavi and look at the slums.
look at Jamal's balls.
Which is not a bad thing because it exists, so it's okay. But I know when movies like Slumdog go to the Oscars and white people watch it, you have a little bit of a defense. Like, it's not all bad guys. We have big buildings.
Yeah.
So I think that's...
That overlooked the slums.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing because now after listening to these Anything But Bollywood episodes, which is a great podcast you guys need to check out also, recommend it. But Deepthi Dukuna, man, when she, in that episode, in the Gunit Monga episode, they talk about how these films get sent to festivals or how distribution kind of works, you know. And with foreigners, it's always like they take that story and they have the infrastructure to distribute. As much as we have all the films that are Bombay based, they're not sort of going out or they're not going through those channels which where it gets taken to international screens and all that kind of thing. You know? So
Fair enough.
I feel like the agencies, they're these sales agents where you have to go through. So they are picking only these slum-based films.
Correct.
Yeah.
Is that what
Correct.
that is like? And they also do their market research and do it. So it's like that's just like status quo kind of stuff. You know, it's like anything about slums is going to do well outside or
Correct.
something.
I get that. Like, even one of the stories from Bombay Talkies is very much this story about this guy who comes to Bombay to meet Amitabh Bachchan and have him eat a piece of laddu or something that his mom made.
It's beautifully acted.
Yeah, and I get that story so much because it really feels like a Bombay that is not our Bombay because we grew up here and we lived here and we accept it as Amitabh Bachchan ka ghar hai yahan
Yeah,
pe.
so we just pass in a bus or a rickshaw past their houses and we're like, okay, they live
It doesn't bother us, but I do have relatives and cousins who've come and said, where does he live?
Yeah.
Or where does Shah Rukh Khan live? And I don't think you register the massive Bollywood popularity if you're not from here.
Yeah.
When you're not from here. Like, I get that.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'll tell you something. I don't think Bombay has been explored. I know it has in books and movies, but I don't think it has in TV at all, which surprises me because I thought about this a lot yesterday and I was like, I don't get why. Because we shoot mostly in Bombay. TV shows are shot here. But I never see a show that has inherently Bombay in its...
I'll tell you a show which has...
I could think of only
CID.
one. I could think of one. Many years ago, Sony had a show called Lady Special, which was about 4 women who meet in the train and have their own stories.
Oh, yeah, correct.
And that was actually a good show, but it was very women-centric, so who's going to watch it? But I did watch it. It was actually good. But I get that. I get those stories. I get train stories.
Yeah.
Even, wasn't a Wednesday about Bombay?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. I think... slums and these kind of terrorism attack ones are perfectly suited in Bombay.
In Bombay.
Did you guys like Black Friday?
I did. I love the book and the movie as well.
I've only seen the film, but the film.
You know, I've seen the movie, but I've actually stayed away from all literature about the Dawood and the
It's very
whole thing.
dense.
93.
I know. I feel like I can't imagine it properly because I feel like I live in such a bubble in Bombay also, even though I understand that it happens. But I'm very removed from it. So I didn't read that, the one with the Dongri something.
Yeah,
What's it
Dongri
called?
Dubai.
Dongri to Dubai, I didn't read that. There's one about all the women, right? All the women of the mafia.
But that's another thing. There's like these different characters, right? Like, have you guys seen Being Cyrus?
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
So that has that whole Parsi side of it, right?
Saif Ali Khan
Correct,
wala.
correct. That's true. That's also a different...
And that's like a Bombay...
there's a lot to explore in Bombay. So I get that, like,
So
there are
all these kind
different
of
sides.
subcultures
Yeah.
and different communities also. Like
But I
how-
get the gang mafia thing because I grew up in an area which was like very rife with all these gang wars. Like the young kids who grew up were like all rowdies, and like I remember once we were playing cricket on the streets and these guys just started fighting and coming and they snatched the bats away from us and started beating each other and then like we had to intervene and take our bats back from them. So I've grown up in such a Bombay as well, but I've seen the nice part of it.
Correct.
I've seen the terrible part of it as well. So I understand like there's no juxtaposition as to why the city is like this, but it's a maximum city.
Correct.
Eventually it is going to have all kinds of people coming from different parts of the world or country trying to survive together, and it's going to be very rife with tension, but sometimes in that there's also beauty, right? There's also like how people help each other out is also some of the best things ever.
Yeah.
Okay, so the book I was talking about was Hussain Zaidi's Mafia Queens of Bombay, of Mumbai, which is about the women in the mafia.
I like
All
how
their
they have
wives.
to now name everything Mumbai just to like make Shiv Sena happy.
Yeah, that's why when Bombay Velvet came out, they had to be like, this is a story about the past. So
yeah.
we cannot call it Mumbai, which I get.
I have a t-shirt which says born in Bombay, raised in Mumbai.
Okay, that was interesting, guys. I mean, I feel like there is still a lot you can do with Bombay,
Correct.
especially new Bombay, like young Bombay.
And Vashi.
And Vashi. And new one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do feel like we're not like adequately represented on in television and in cinema. Not that, like, I mean, as a part of actual...
Locations, like.
Yeah, I mean, obviously everything is shot here all the time.
Yeah, they all go to Mud Island and like film
Yeah,
studios.
but what I mean is where Bombay city is an integral part of the story. I don't think that happens that often as it should, because considering the city, I think it happens a lot for Delhi.
Correct.
No, because I feel like a lot of Delhi
Sarojini, CP, and like I don't even know these
or
places.
the fancy ass places, like the really rich Delhi gets represented here, because they're close also to Haryana and Gurgaon.
Like how Rang De Basanti captured Delhi and
Correct.
the suburbs of that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I don't think we have anything like that.
Like how they would like drive at night and jump off those canals and everything. I would like to watch something about Bombay.
Yeah, driving to the ceiling.
Yeah. Like, so for example, every time a character goes and has a thought-provoking moment, they go to Bandstand or Carter Road and like stare at the Oblivion.
Yeah.
But so I found a great place in Bombay to stand and like just, so there's Lower Parel station has a bridge in the middle.
Yeah.
Where if you just stand there, there's nothing. You just see Mahalakshmi ahead of you and it's empty. There's two buildings and there's this crazy breeze that comes from
You're
there.
talking about one next to station,
Yeah.
when you climb the stairs in that Machi Market.
Yeah. So that place is just like very tranquil for me. I just go there and stand for like sometimes half an hour or something.
How wake up set of you, dude.
Yeah, I know. But it's just nice.
Yeah.
I like that place.
I do love Wake Up Sid, by the way. I think Wake Up Sid is a great Bombay film.
Yeah, it
because
is.
he comes from a rich Bombay and then he has to live in Andheri.
Okay.
Middle class Bombay. Alright, that was super interesting. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Amit, who's going to pay tribute to a sci-fi writer called Jerry Pournell, who passed away recently. Let's take that break.
In a world where people are busy playing Mendicott at Diwali parties, two men decide to go all in the river.
Don't you mean on the river?
On the river.
Oh yeah.
Two men will go where no one has ever gone before, to a studio with no air conditioning or Coke Zero, to talk about poker.
Hey, order लो ना यार कोई क्या है ये बकवास?
The SpartanPoker.com presents Mera Kaam Poker, hosted by Azim Banatwala
The best comedian in the world, according to himself.
and Peter Abraham.
Not related to John.
New episodes out every Wednesday on the IVM podcast app or any other podcasting app you use. And for all our listeners who want to try out their hand at poker, you can log on to thespartanpoker.com, register yourself as a user with the promo code IVM, and you will get 200 bonus cash, which you can use to play poker for free. See you at the tables.
So Jerry Pournell passed away last week. Jerry Pournell is, well, I mean, like so what we'll do I'll recommend a book that he wrote, but the reason why I thought it's important we talk about him is that he's kind of he's an important figure in media, especially the kind of media that we're doing here, which is this conversational thing rather than the high above, the words from on above, which used to be the way that a lot of media used to function. So he used to write a magazine. He used to write a column for Byte magazine called Chaos Manor, and he still did that. One of the first bloggers. He turned the magazine column into a blog thing. But what was interesting about it was that it was the first real thing that was written from like a fan perspective rather than like an expert perspective. And So, I mean, like, he's kind of important in that sense. I mean, like, there's direct lineage between him and what we're doing over here.
What did he write columns about? Like,
so it was a tech column, but so, I mean, like, back in the 70s and 80s, right? I mean, like, technology was very different than it is today, right? So, I mean, like, most of the columns that were written in Byte magazine, I mean, like, they used to say this, that were written by people who were computer makers, right? People who used to make software, people who used to make hardware, those kinds of people. Very little of it was written from the perspective of the computer user.
Right.
So what he would do is he would say, like, like he has a law, which is kind of, so he wrote these Pournell laws, right? So one of the funny ones is that whenever you have a computer problem, please check the goddamn cables. That was like his first law. And back in the 70s and 80s, that was a big kind of, it was a big deal, right? I mean, like, it was just kind of in that sense. So what I want to recommend, though, so he's also an extremely accomplished science fiction writer. So he's written, like, I don't know, dozens and dozens of books. A lot of them are with Larry Niven, who is probably best known for Ringworld, which is also a really cool science fiction book. It's about a world of, it's a ring around the world, kind of this. But the book I'll recommend is Lucifer's Hammer. This book was written, I think, sometime in the mid-70s. It was the second or third collaboration between David Niven and Jerry Pournell. It was one of the early, it was a really interesting, so it was an asteroid book. So it was a book about what will happen when there's an asteroid, when asteroids hit the Earth, and then how things are going to go bad.
Right.
And so it's like a post-apocalyptic kind of thing where you have different kind of groups who are fighting each other. There are like 20 people who have declared themselves to be president of the U.S. And it's just all that kind of, that kind of this where then there's a warrior who emerges from the desert who goes out to attack so it's just that kind of old school Mad Max. We're pretty much Mad Maxy, right? Kind of this, but a really, really fun book, really well written, lots of interesting ideas. It's like one of the scientifically most accurate books of this kind of stuff.
Oh, okay.
So that was Jerry Pournell's thing too, right? He used to write science accurately. So he's a hard sci-fi guy rather than a soft sci-fi guy.
He wrote this book in the 70s, you said?
Yes.
How old was he when he died?
Oh, he was pretty old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, like, he's been around since like the so I think he's been writing since the 50s.
Wow.
He was very early consultant at NASA when NASA first started.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, like, he's a really, really accomplished, really, really interesting guy.
Wow, that's
so,
amazing.
yeah, please, everybody, just check out his books. I mean, like, since he passed away, you should definitely. There are a bunch of other really good ones. The Mote in God's Eye is another classic. That's more of an intergalactic kind of story. But Lucifer's Hammer is really, really approachable. So even if you're not a big sci-fi guy, it's or girl, that's a show that's a book that will work for you.
All right, thanks, Amit. That was our episode. If you have other Bombay recommendations or anything else that we missed out, please write it to us. We are on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. We are IVM Podcast. And we'll be back next week.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Sorry to say, but there's been a slight delay due to the apocalypse having suddenly begun. As you can see, there's death, destruction, and chaos taking place all around us. But don't you worry, food and drinks will be served shortly, and I would recommend checking out IVM Podcasts to get some of your favorite Indian podcasts. We'll keep you going till this whole thing blows over. Thank you.